You're listening to the Life Like You Mean It podcast, episode 3. Have you ever thought of writing a book? Maybe it's not a book you've been contemplating. Maybe it's starting your own business or branching out in your field. Maybe what you're contemplating is a lifestyle change or even a change in where you live. So what's stopping you? Today we'll be talking about overcoming that voice in your head that says, I can't do it. I'm not good enough. I don't know enough. I'm not the expert in my field I need to be to have the right to do this. You know that voice, don't you? My guest today, Daniella Blechner, the founder of Conscious Dreams Publishing, best-selling author of Mr. Wrong, and book journey mentor, knows exactly what it's like to face that voice threatening to stop her in her tracks. Like most of us, she constantly asked herself who she thought she was to write a book. How could she be worthy? But instead of listening to that voice and being scarred by the rejection she faced, forcing her to put her dreams of becoming an author on hold, she stepped up to the plate, wrote that book, published it herself, and then decided not to stop there. No, her passion to empower other women to transform their stories, messages, and powerful journeys into books of impact and influence drove her to open her very own publishing company. I mean, if that's not beating the negative, self-defeating voice in your head, I don't know what is. Let's face it, we all face limitations like this every single day, especially when change comes knocking on our door, causing us to step out of our comfort zone. The difference between those who are successful and those who throw in the towel is what decisions they make in the face of those limitations. Are you curious about what decisions Daniella made to get her to this point in her life? A successful businesswoman, book journey mentor, publisher, speaker, and best-selling author? Me too. So let's dive right in and let you meet my friend Danny.
You're listening to the Life Like You Mean It podcast, where we firmly believe that you, and only you, have the power to make the changes you seek in your life. Survivor of 10 years of child abuse, Lisa Sabaniak, will help you to empower yourself to overcome your limitations in whatever form they take, to build the life you truly deserve. It's time to hear from fellow experts who know firsthand what building a successful and satisfying life because of our past experiences is like, and exactly what it takes to do it. If you're ready, willing and able to get honest with yourself, roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty with the hard work that lasting change takes, you're in the right place. Here's your host, NLP practitioner, speaker, Reiki master, author, and chipaholic, Lisa Sabaniak.
Today's episode is dedicated to yogadownload.com, a fantastic website providing so many yoga videos to download, it's almost overwhelming. Those that know me know that yoga is a big part of my life, and it has been now for a couple of decades. I first found yoga like a lot of people. I was looking for something to help me stay fit while calming my mind. I soon discovered that yoga was so much more than that. Being a survivor of child abuse meant for me that I had detached myself from not only the abuse and others who could hurt me, but even myself. Yoga was the very first time that I could feel some discomfort and not panic. In fact, feeling that discomfort gave me strength because I also realized I had full control. I could ease further into the pose, or I could back off until the discomfort lifted. It was the very first time that I felt empowered, and it was a decade after leaving my abuser. I was hooked. Now, I know a lot of people don't have the funds or the time to head out to a yoga studio a few times a week, and while I do recommend that is the greatest way to start your yoga practice, this is a perfect solution if time and money is the deterrent. Head on over to my website, lifelikeyoumeanit.com/yoga, to read more about yogadownload.com and even learn my personal favorites. That's lifelikeyoumeanit.com/yoga. All right, Danny, welcome to the Life Like You Mean It podcast. It's so exciting to have you here. Could you tell our guests a little bit about yourself?
I can indeed. It's very exciting to be here as well. So thank you so much, Lisa. So my name is Daniella Blechner. I'm an author. I'm a book journey mentor. I'm founder of a company called Conscious Dreams Publishing. We work with authors, mainly women from all over the world who have powerful messages and stories to share. And we assist them through the publishing process and help them to transform their ideas and their messages into professional books. And Lisa is one of our authors.
Yay! Yes, and I had an incredible experience with not just you, but with the whole team. I mean, it really is an amazing experience. So, not that we're going to have this show be one giant plug for your business, but I think it's really important for a lot of people. This particular theme that we have going on right now, we're talking about overcoming limitations. And one of those giant limitations is that thought that everybody gets in their head that they're not good enough, they can't do this. And even if they get the courage to sit down and write the book, then it's that whole, onslaught of what they think is the obstacle to, well, how in the heck am I ever going to find a publisher? How am I ever going to get this out there? And so if, other people are anything like me, I had no idea that there was a service like yours available. Right? Like that there would be workshops that I could take to help me hone my craft, that would allow me to meet other budding authors or authors that have already written one and are maybe moving on to their next one, and just open up all of these doors. And then not to mention the whole team that comes with your business that helps in every other area of it as well, with the editing and the graphic design and all of that kind of stuff. It's just incredible that it all comes together.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. You've been great to work with.
Well, I think it's really important that people know that, especially those that are sitting there listening right now and thinking, oh, I've always had this idea of writing a book of poetry, or writing a book about my life, or writing a fiction novel, or, whatever. And, then they sit there and they let that voice that seems to be screaming, saying, you're not good enough, you can't do this, who do you think you are, kind of get in the way of them actually doing it. And so knowing that there's somebody like you that, helps in every step of the journey, to be like, there's nothing different between me or you and everybody else that's listening. You've gone through this process yourself because you've written a book.
Indeed, I have. I had those same, fears and doubts about, publishing and writing myself, definitely.
Yeah. So is that what actually, did you write your book and then start Conscious Dreams Publishing, or had you already started the publishing?
Yeah. Well, no, Conscious Dreams Publishing kind of grew out of my own passion to write. It was never my intention to set up a publishing company or to publish a book. My background was teaching. I also come from a film and TV background. So I was very much into, writing for TV, and I had a company called Conscious Dreams Productions years and years ago. But I'd never thought about, publishing books through my own company. So, I mean, Conscious Dreams Publishing really started through writing my own book, as I said, and I've always wanted to be an author. It's something that I've said from, age 4, I'm going to be an author. And the original book that I was writing, I started writing in 2008, wasn't the book that I published. In fact, I haven't published that. My first book was called Mr. Wrong, which I published in 2014. And through experience in my own journey and, foraging or, navigating my way through the quagmire of this plethora of information about publishing and writing, and go this route, do this route, go that way, and marketing and branding. And, it was just so much stuff to understand. It was so easy to see how people might just get lost and never do it at all, because it's almost like there's too much stuff out there. You don't want to make a wrong move. So I eventually sort of researched heavily, I got obsessed after rejections from traditional publishers and agents. I decided to set up Conscious Dreams Publishing and publish my own book myself. And through that, I got a lot of success through publishing my book. I did really well. Got onto the bestseller list. I beat, books like thank you, Steve Harvey's Think Like a Man, Act Like a Lady. That's what it's called. Yeah. And other well-known books as well. So I suddenly started to realize, actually, I can do this. This is good. This is working. And I got some really good press coverage, really good speaking opportunities. And then I found lots of other women sort of coming to me saying, right, I've always wanted to publish a book, and I've written this. And do you know an editor? Do you know a typesetter? Do you know a cover designer? And I was, hooking them up with all these different professionals, and realized, wow, I've actually got a hub. I've got a team of people here who I can recommend, experts who are really talented in their field. My background is teaching. I love literature. I love books. Why don't I just set up, Conscious Dreams Publishing and help these women to really craft their ideas and to publish their books? But not only that, to learn how to promote, market, get PR themselves, and be in total control of their own vision. So it was organic, really.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that's the word that was in my mind of thinking, wow, so here you were, just like the rest of us that, had an idea about a book. And then not only did you have so much work that you had to do to figure out the publishing side of things so that you could self-publish, but then you chose to allow this organic flow for you to actually help others and turn it into a business. So why didn't you just stop there? Why didn't you just say, oh yeah, well, here's a little bit of advice to a couple of people? What was the passion? Where did that come from?
Because I love seeing their successes. And when I mentored somebody, and I did it as a labor of love. I did it because I believed in her story, and I loved what she was doing, and I wanted to see her do well. And I didn't charge for my time. And then I saw her doing really well, and I saw her doing her speaking engagements, and I saw her getting press and being doing radio interviews, and I saw her growing confidence. And I realized there's really something in this. I can really help people. But I know how much time that it takes, and it took. I've obviously got to charge. I've got to charge for this now if I'm going to do it properly. How can I create something that myself as an author, when I was going through that, mess of not knowing what I was doing or where to go, or how to refine my skills or how to promote myself? Why don't I create something that's all under one roof, just to make? Because it's hard enough writing the book, and then you've got this added pressure of knowing how to publish your book. And then on top of that, it's, your life after your book. How do you really market it? How do you reap the benefits of having published a book? And how do you reach your target market? So I wanted to create something that was so simple and easy for authors to access and to understand, and to be assisted through that process, so that they made the best out of their book and their vision.
That's amazing. That's so inspiring. And I know that, when I was sitting down thinking about finally writing my book after 20 years of contemplation, I didn't really think about the doors that it would open. And it kind of sounds similar with you. It's like the focus is on the writing of the book, and then the focus becomes on, well, how am I going to get this book out to the masses? And then you don't really realize, well, actually, then once you are a published author, it's amazing that, you can use that to get speaking engagements and lots of other things that, perhaps some of the listeners that are listening now don't necessarily have that as a goal, but you just never know where life is going to take you. And if you've got a story inside you, it's worth sharing, and you never know what's going to come from that storytelling.
100%. 100%. That's so true. I mean, when I first published my book, I had no idea really of the opportunities that were going to happen. I didn't, think about speaking. It wasn't really in my mind. I knew that, I wanted to do radio interviews and maybe have some reviews, but I wasn't thinking about doing live events and being asked to be on a panel about this and asked to be on a panel about that and speaking at this event and being in this paper. And another thing as well that I would impress on people, and what I teach at the Power of Your Story workshop that we run, is that when you do get lots of opportunities coming to you, just be sure that you know what your why is and what your message is and who your target market is, because you will get some really good opportunities, but not every single opportunity is golden. And just make sure that it's in alignment with your vision, your values, your message, and your mission. So that and your why, that's something I would say is really, really important. It's something that I definitely learned.
That is really, really important. And I know that you talk about that a lot in the workshops. And, for me, I was in a kind of a slightly different place when I took the workshop, because I'd actually already written the book when I had found my way to you. I only had, I think, the last chapter to write or something. And so you still offered me to take the workshop, which I was so grateful for. And so I could see that, okay, I had a very, very specific idea for my book, probably because I've been mulling it over for 20 years.
Not that long.
Yeah, but also because of what my book was about and it being a personal journey and whatnot. So I didn't need to have that type of help to help me to, understand my vision and my ultimate goal and whatnot. But I could totally see how other people who are at the earlier stages, and if I hadn't taken 20 years, if I had found you the first time I thought about writing the book, that absolutely, that's such a key thing. And I found now that my book is written and published and it's out there, and I need to remind myself from time to time what that why is and make sure that I don't deviate from that, because it is so easy to do that, isn't it? I mean, you grow as people, of course. So, deviation isn't that we're trying to stunt growth, but it's just making sure you always have your eye on that prize of what that ultimate message is, what it is that you want from it. Because there's no point on you, burning yourself out, lighting, the ends of both the candle at both ends so that you can be on everything when meanwhile,
even there.
There's only a very small amount of that that's actually going to be of service to you. Right? And that's the whole point, is that you want to be able to be of service to others. When you've got a story in you, whatever that story is, you want to share it. Otherwise, you wouldn't bother mulling over writing a book, would you? It's the act of sharing that story. And so always making sure that you're coming from a place of service and keeping that target audience in mind. That's an excellent tip. Do you have any other tips that you would like, very briefly, of course, because you want people to be able to use you as your book journey mentor and whatnot.
Do everything.
Yeah. What tips could you give to somebody who maybe is just thinking, you know what, maybe I can do this. Maybe I'm not necessarily an expert in my field, but my voice is worth hearing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's lots of things, really, lots of tips and lots of things to consider. But I would say that if you are thinking about writing a book, and let's say you're writing because you have a business. If you have a business, it's absolutely fantastic. It's a fantastic way to leverage your business. A lot of people think that, I'm going to write a book and I want it to be a bestseller and, make lots of money. That's a myth. That's great. I mean, J.K. Rowling did amazingly well. But the purpose of your book, most authors, your main source of revenue won't come through your book sales. You've got to think about your book as part of your business, embed it into your business model or into your business plan or your strategy. So your book should be a marketing tool to, number one, boost your credibility, get you in front of a global audience. You also establish yourself as an authority in your market. On top of that, it's a gateway into leading people into you, getting to know you, the person, building that know, like, and trust factor is, you as an NLP coach, for example, and it sets you apart from others. But on top of that, you've got to write a good book. It's obviously got to be a good book. But on top of that, it leads people into your services. So your main source of revenue should be through think about your book as a staircase. What's coming after the book? Are you going to be running a workshop? Are you going to be doing live events? Are you going to be doing speaking engagements? Are you selling your books at these speaking engagements? Are you doing one-to-one coaching? So it should be a lead into your world and the services that you offer. So when you start thinking like that, then you start thinking about your book as being an integral part of your business.
This is the perfect spot to take a quick break to ask, are you ready to make some serious changes by living your life like you mean it? I've got just the thing for you. I've created a free 30-day challenge to help you transform your mindset and your emotional well-being. For 30 days, you'll receive a daily email packed with goodness, including a new mindset exercise for you to tackle, as well as fun things like meditations. All you need to do is to commit to this challenge by registering and then opening the emails each and every day and completing your challenges. Simple, right? If you said yes, then you're ready and you know that you deserve this. You can register for free by going to lifelikeyoumeanit.com/challenge. You can also find this link in the show notes. I think everybody would want to know what types of obstacles that you personally faced when you were writing and publishing your book.
How much time you got? The writing wasn't really the problem because I love writing. I mean, my book's called Mr. Wrong, so it's based on relationships. So it needed an element of researching. And I love researching. I can get really involved in researching. It's my thing. So there's a lot of research that went into it. There's a lot of stories written by women across the world and some stories from men. So I wouldn't call it an obstacle. I'd say what was challenging was probably, it wasn't challenging finding them because they were all finding me through this blog I'd written. So it's finding the time to speak to them on the phone, to get their stories sent in, and then obviously sending them permission slips and making sure that they were signed before I could, get them in. On top of that, I was working 6 days a week. So it was like, all of these things, time constraints, getting it in. But I would say another obstacle, I guess, would be myself. I was my obstacle because I didn't know that much about publishing. And I did everything. One of my stories is that, I got this book called Getting Published by Harry Bingham, and it tells you step by step, how to get your book published traditionally. So I followed that route, first of all. And, I wrote a query letter to lots of agents. And then, they'd respond back and say, yeah, this is brilliant. It's funny. It's witty. It's this, it's that. However, we're looking for somebody with a marketing plan or a bigger platform. I didn't know what a marketing plan was. I didn't know what they meant by platform. So, then I was going to traditional publishers, and all of this wasted a lot of time. And I say wasted a lot of time. I would do it again if that's the route I wanted to go. But I wasted time because during that process of, waiting for a response, I stopped writing. And one of the biggest epiphanies for me was that I wasn't actually waiting for a response. I was waiting for validation. I was waiting for, somebody higher up there to tell me, this is great. This book's brilliant. It's going to be a bestseller. And your story matters, you matter, these women's stories matters. And I lost focus for a little bit, and I gave my power somewhere else. And I think what I've learned through those rejections, and also through having to honor these women's stories because it's their time, effort, and a lot of these stories are very poignant stories of overcoming things like abuse and toxic relationships and what they've learned from it. I had to honor these stories, so I had to set this up and I had to do it myself. So I'd say a challenge probably was not believing in myself enough, and not knowing enough. And so by not knowing enough, I only thought there was one route, and that was, going the traditional way. So I'd like to think that I overcame that by setting up Conscious Dreams and publishing it myself and helping other people to publish their books. But I would say to people, look for that information, learn as much as you can, research as much as you can, but find an expert to really help you through that process.
Now, with you saying that your obstacle about believing in yourself, I mean, it seems to me that you've overcome that because not only did you publish the book, but then you've also created Conscious Dreams Publishing to help others as well.
Yeah.
But what was that like mentally? Do you remember what it is that you had to say to yourself, or what it is that you had to do to decide in that moment, no, I'm moving forward. I need to find a way to believe in myself enough to make this happen, versus I tap out?
Oh, it was a red hot passion. I can't even explain it to you. I remember two things. One, I wrote a blog called Fear and Doubt. I mean, first of all, I've got a lot of my personal story in that book, and, it's talking about relationships. I come from, my mother's a strict West Indian woman. You don't talk your business. You don't air your dirty laundry. So there's that vulnerability. But something kicked inside of me. And what kicked inside of me was that people were relating to some of the stories I was saying. I had integrity with this message that I was, sending. It wasn't about berating anyone. It was about learning about myself. And I know you talk a lot about belief systems. So it's about, I wanted to really unite, inspire and empower women, and to give us a safe space to share our journeys and stories, and to laugh at them and reflect on ourselves, and question and challenge belief systems that create or help us to, make us make choices that may not be for our highest good, and to be able to know that we've got the power to make better choices. And so by sticking to that why, that overcame, that just overcame or overpowered any kind of fear or doubt that I had, and wanting to stay true to these women and wanting to get their stories out there because it was important. And so getting over this ego sense of, I'm being a bit vulnerable, I've shared something of myself. And when I was getting people saying to me, I can really relate to that, and actually your forgiveness meditation that you've written has really helped me. And, now that is what really pushed me forward to say, right, okay, this has been rejected, but I have to get this done. And another thing I think I said to myself was, I can and I will. And on top of that, because I'd done this crowdfunding campaign, and I had lots of people behind me, lots of people had contributed to actually the crowdfunding campaign, which meant that I owed them a book. There was just no way that I could not do it. So I think it
Right.
was more, yes, I was, fearful of, oh my gosh, I've revealed a little bit of myself here, and that's quite a big thing. It's a very big thing to do because I'm quite actually a private person. But the keeping my word and honouring these women's stories was what drove me through, really. I didn't really have time to think about, oh my gosh, what if it's not a good book? It was just like, I've got
Yeah.
to do this now.
It sounds to me like you had yourself set up in a perfect way so that you could challenge those types of doubts that we all have about ourselves, that you unconsciously made your book not just about your story, but other people's stories, so that you felt that you were held accountable, that you were responsible for allowing their voices to be heard. And then
Interesting. I'd never thought.
and then you also unconsciously did the crowdfunding, which was probably a very conscious effort to obviously raise funds to help you with the whole process. But again, that puts the onus on you to have to follow through, right? Which is a really, really interesting thing to me, because I think every single person has negative words that they say to themselves, right? Maybe it's not the first thing that they say, but for most of us it is, right? If something new comes up, or something that's really going to push us outside our comfort zone, and the first thing that we do is I can't do that. Right? And it's interesting to me that your way of dealing with that, whether you realized it or not, was to set yourself up so that if you chose to walk away from it, you'd be letting other people down. And that is not you. You will not do that.
So interesting. I have never thought about it like that, because interestingly enough, the book that I actually wrote before Mr. Wrong, I still haven't published it. And maybe it's a very different sort of book. It's a fictional book, and it's very, non-fiction. It's not really much of a, I've published quite a few non-fiction books, like poetry books and everything else, and there hasn't really been that much of a struggle or difference. But with this book, this fiction book, there is something I'm not quite putting it out there, because I feel like it's not ready yet. It's not perfected yet. That's probably why I think fiction's a bit more difficult for me, in terms of, like, is the plot right? The characters right? Do I need to have this here and another flashback? Has she had enough, has she had enough challenges and obstacles in her journey? There's all of that going on, and nobody really knows. I'm not really accountable. Nobody really knows about it. But I think it's very interesting point that you made about the other women, because that's what really drove me through. It was like, well, forget you now, Danny. This is about other women now. And you're right. One of my pet hates is being let down or disappointing people. And I know what it's like to being let down or disappointed. So it's something that I wouldn't allow myself to do to others. So thank you very much. I feel like I've had a bit of a session here.
Well, and now you've just bared your soul and told everybody listening about this book. So now you actually are being held accountable, because there's readers that are waiting on Bated Book.
Thanks, Lisa.
See what we just done there? Oh, I love it. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. So hopefully in the show notes, in maybe a year's time or so, I'll be able to go back in and update it with the link to this other book.
Wouldn't that be great? Oh, okay, that's going to push me forward. Yes. There
you go. We all need a little push, don't we? So do you have any bit of advice for somebody who has maybe they've even written a few chapters, or maybe they've just molded over in their head, and they're stuck at that point where they keep telling themselves that they're not an expert? Who are they to, think that they could write this book? What steps do you think that they could take to try to overcome that?
Get this all the time. There's a particular lady I'd like to mention, actually. Her name's Gosha Gorna, and she is a transformational coach, and she's actually created this method called the expansion game, and it's a powerful tool to help people to transform their fear into their greatest brilliance. Now, interestingly enough, she's one of our authors, and she's a #1 international bestseller in 3 categories, not just for one day, but a sustained period of time. She's done incredibly well in her book. what really surprised me was when she shares her story, when she speaks, she's had this technique for years and years and years, and she wasn't going to write about it until somebody said to her, "What's that technique you use?" And she didn't have a name for it. She says, "I want to put it in my book." And she said, "Oh, well, it doesn't have a name." And then she suddenly thought, wow, somebody else is going to, wants there to be a name for this technique that I use in my coaching. And she wants to write a book about it. Should I not be doing this?
Yeah.
And then she realized that she had all these like limiting belief systems, not good enough. She's severely dyslexic, fear of being criticized, fear of being judged, fear of being humiliated, which are all things that she helps her own clients to, use to transmute and transform into brilliance. And she realized, oh my gosh, I've got to have some integrity here. I've got to use the expansion game on myself so that I can release this fear and doubt about writing my own book, which she did. And she went to a book writing coach, and then it came to us, and we helped her to refine it and edit it and publish her book. And she's done extremely well. So what I would say to people is just, that's an example of somebody who's severely dyslexic, had her own limiting belief systems. It doesn't matter how much of an expert you are in your field. You can teach people things, but it doesn't mean you're not going to have these own fears yourself. Nobody's, everyone feels like an imposter at some point in their lives, no matter how high up they climb. There's always another level. And so to use that fear and in a positive way, and find a way to use that to drive you forwards, and think about it. What is the absolute worst thing that could happen if you publish a book? And you don't want no one to buy it. Go and find an expert. Do it. The worst thing. One of two of my favorite quotes. One is by Maya Angelou, who says, "Feel the fear and do it anyway." And then J.K. Rowling, one of my favorite authors, talks about living so cautiously that you never fail at all. In which case, you failed by default.
Oh yes, I love that.
Along those words. Yeah. So how are you ever going to know? Do you really want to leave this life, leave this planet, having never tried, never given your own dream a shot, and live that? What is there possibly to lose apart from the fact that you'll never know?
Exactly. That's exactly how I live my life. Whenever I'm faced with something that is going to push me outside my comfort zone, and that little voice comes out to tell me that I can't do it and I don't deserve it, I sit there and I think, okay, if I'm on my deathbed, which I'm going to be at some point, as we all are, am I going to look back at this moment and the decision that I make now with pride? Or am I going to regret the decision that I make, right? And that includes making the decision to do it out of spite as well, right? Because like you said, not every opportunity is actually a real opportunity for you. It's not a, say yes to absolutely everything, but to say yes with purpose, with things that actually gel with where you are in your path and what is going to serve your highest good, as well as help and serve others. And so, if I'm feeling like I don't want to do something, it's really important for me that I understand, is that coming from a place of fear, or is that coming from a separate place where this is just not my path to walk right now? Right. And if it's coming out of fear, then I use that every single time. What am I going to think about in this moment when I look back on my deathbed? Am I going to be happy?
Yes.
Or am I going to have regrets? Because there's nothing worse than having regrets about your life, is there?
Exactly. And that's what they say when people are, I think there's a research done in a hospice, and they looked at the top fears, or the top things people regret is never having, told people that they love them, having, fulfilled the dreams that they set out to do when they were young, but at some point in their life, or never having been forgiven or forgiven somebody themselves.
Yes.
You don't want to live like that.
No, exactly. So what was her name again that you were just talking about? Is it Gosha?
Oh, Gosha Gorner, yes. Gosha, yeah.
I have got to have her on the show, because that sounds like definitely something that the audience would want to hear. Maybe you could set that up for me, Danny. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
I will set that up.
It's all who you know, baby. It's all who you know. All right.
Exactly.
So if someone is interested in writing and or publishing a book, how can they reach you?
Yes, you can hop over to my website, which is www.consciousdreamspublishing.com, where you can book a free 30-minute consultation. It doesn't matter what stage you are in the process. You could just have an idea. You could have written a few chapter headings. You might be halfway through. You may have finished, not quite sure where to turn. So that call really is to give you some clarity and direction and see how we can assist you along the way.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being on the show, Danny. I just know that there's going to be so many people that are going to listen to this and say, yeah, that's right. I don't want to be on my deathbed regretting not writing my book.
Exactly.
Excellent.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Danny. Have you ever thought about joining a book club? Well, then I've got great news for you. Reading has always been an important factor in my healing journey as well as my life journey. But like many people, it's pretty easy to push the time that's necessary for reading a good book aside for yet another week. In an effort to hold myself accountable and make the time for reading, I started a free online book club. That's right, the Life Like You Mean It book club is completely free. The meetings are held on Facebook Live every 6 weeks. So if you'd like to join in and have a group of like-minded people hold you accountable for finding time for yourself to read, learn, heal, and grow, then go to lifelikeyoumeanit.com/book-club today. Wow, I'm just blown away by both Dani's story of triumph over her self-induced limitations and all the amazing tips she's given to us all. I mean, she gave tips on overcoming imposter syndrome when moving outside your comfort zone, things to consider before writing your book, and how to incorporate your book into your business. I'm so inspired, and I hope you are too, because nearly everything we talked about today is transferable, isn't it? I mean, sure, we spoke specifically about writing and publishing your book because that's Dani's expertise. But you can easily take her top tips for overcoming imposter syndrome and relate it to anything in your life. Are you reacting from fear, or is this something that truly isn't for your highest good? If it's a fear-based reaction, will you regret the decision that you make about this when you're on your deathbed? Isn't it better to give it a try and push yourself outside your comfort zone? I mean, what's the worst thing that could happen? And is that really something you couldn't handle? Only you can answer those questions. When you do, ask yourself which voice you deserve to listen to. The self-defeating one that is scared and thinks putting you down will keep you safe, or the much softer, almost imperceptible voice that knows you deserve success.
Thanks for listening to the Life Like You Mean It podcast. Head on over to the show notes for this episode and all past episodes at www.lifelikeyoumeanit.com/blog. If you love the show, leave a rating and review. Share that love by spreading the word, post a link to your social media, share it with your friends, and follow or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast hosting site. Thanks so much for tuning in. Until next time, remember to live your life on purpose by living life like you mean it.